Hi there, and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Jaded, provided an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we're going to tackle exploring your emotions, thinking about different obstacles to communicating your emotions effectively, as well as offering some guidelines for communicating emotions effectively. Throughout this exploration, we will tackle key concepts including emotions, feeling rules, framing rules, surface acting, deep acting, emotion work, emotional intelligence, emotional competence, emotional expression strategy, assertive communication, aggressive communication, and deferential communication. Also, make sure you stay tuned to the end where I combine two Ask Dr. Shepards around feeling jaded when it comes to dating. So when we think about emotions and understanding our emotions, it's important to get a baseline definition of what emotions are. So for this podcast, as well as for my work when it comes to interpersonal communication, I always think about our emotions being our experiences and interpretations of internal sensations as they are shaped by psychological perceptions, languages, and social experiences. So when it comes to emotions, we have both framing rules and feeling rules. So in the context of emotions and social interactions, framing rules define how we understand and interpret situations, while feeling rules are socially shared norms about what emotions are appropriate in those situations. Essentially, feeling rules refer to social shared norms about how one should feel in a given situation, while framing rules are going to dictate how we understand and define the meaning of those situations. Again, those feeling rules are unspoken norms about what emotions are appropriate or expected in this particular situation, where framing rules are the unwritten rules that define the meaning and context of a situation. So if I'm thinking about feeling rules, we might think about a funeral. A feeling rule usually dictates that when you're at a funeral, you're going to be sad, you're going to be mourning. You might laugh a little bit if someone shares a funny anecdote or story, maybe in the eulogy, but laughing too much might be seen as inappropriate. And we know on the flip side with a framing rules, as I said, are those unwritten rules that define the meaning of the situation. So a funeral is typically framed as being sad, where on the flip side, one might think of a wedding as framed as a joyous celebration, or even a graduation is a joyous celebration. So with those framing and feeling rules intact, we hopefully will act in accordance with how those rules are dictated. Now, of course, we oftentimes will see people who subvert these feeling and framing rules. So, for instance, if the framing rule is that a graduation is supposed to be a happy time, you might see someone who's really sad and they are transgressing that rule. So they might seem out of place. Well, what's going on? And oftentimes our eyes go, especially with perception of different events, to people who are not performing the emotions that we are expecting them to perform. So when it comes to violating framing or feeling rules, some might rely on surface acting or deep acting to hopefully cover that up so they don't stand out. So for instance, maybe you went through a bad breakup and you're at your graduation. So you're feeling really sad about your breakup, but this is supposed to be a happy moment. And so maybe you briefly catch some sadness. That emotion is hitting you. You're allowing it to flow through you, but you might either use surface acting or deep acting to hopefully change your expression. So surface acting is where you control the outward expression of emotions rather than controlling the actual feelings. So you are going to try and come across as if you aren't sad when you are. You're going to come across maybe that you're not upset or angry or frustrated, even though you are. So sometimes I think about surface acting. A really great example is when you feel as if something is off with someone and they're like, no, I'm fine, I'm okay. And they try and put on a brave face. Oftentimes this is surface acting that we are seeing from that person. Meanwhile, deep acting occurs when you change your internal feelings to align with external expectations in hopes of producing more genuine emotional displays. So this is going to require emotion work. And so this is the effort to generate what we think are appropriate feelings in particular situations. So going back to the graduation, you just had a breakup. You might take a beat, maybe you go to the bathroom and you kind of give yourself an internal pep talk that, I'm feeling sad because this years-long relationship that I had is over. I thought this person would be here to celebrate me at this monumental occasion, but I'm not going to let that diminish all the hard work that I've put in, all the other people who have supported me who are here to support me today. So you're working with that emotion. You're not denying the emotion, but you're trying to change your internal feeling a bit so that it then will reflect a more genuine emotional display. So you might still be a little sad and have some sadness behind your eyes, but you might also slowly shift to feel happier and joyous for the occasion of you graduating. So when we move further into thinking and understanding the ocean of emotions, as I oftentimes say, we have these concepts of emotional intelligence as well as emotional competence. Of course, emotional intelligence has entered kind of the lexicon for a lot of people, but it's important to still define what it is. So emotional intelligence is simply the ability to recognize feelings, to judge which feelings are appropriate in which situations, and to communicate those feelings effectively. So someone with high emotional intelligence tends to foster usually more satisfying relationships, and they're more comfortable expressing themselves and tend to work more efficiently with others. This is what we've come to know. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, there are kind of 8 breakdowns of different qualities that one has when they have high levels of emotional intelligence. So I'm going to read off the 8 usually that people possess. And so the more of these quote unquote 8 qualities or qualifiers that you have, one would argue the higher your emotional intelligence is. And the less amount that you have, maybe the lower your emotional intelligence is. So of course, the first quality is being aware of your feelings. Can you label your feelings? The second is dealing with emotions without being overcome by them. The third is not letting setbacks and disappointments derail you. The fourth is challenging your feelings to assist you in achieving your goals. The fifth, being able to understand how others feel without them spelling it out. The sixth, listening to your feelings and those of others so you can learn from them. 7, recognizing societal norms for expression of emotions. So that's going to come with those feeling and framing rules that we talked about. And then last but not least, 8, having a strong yet realistic sense of optimism. So the more that you have on this list, the higher theorists would argue your emotional intelligence is. So let's say from the 8, you maybe only have 2. One would probably argue you have a low level emotional intelligence. If you have about half, you might kind of middle of the road average. You have 7, 6, 8, you clearly have a higher level of emotional intelligence. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, we also understand that there are ways to improve our emotional intelligence. So I've referenced before that one of my students recommended this book to me years ago, and I literally read the book because she made it seem so interesting. It's called The 33-Day Let me see. It's Discovering Your Soul Signature, a 33-day path to purpose, passion, and joy. I just had to turn around and get it from my bookshelf. And so with this book, it helped me particularly improve my own emotional intelligence because it helped me figure out how to not be overcome by my emotions, which we know is number 2, dealing with emotions without being overcome by them. It also helped me realize not to let setbacks and disappointments derail me from my ultimate goals, and also challenging my feelings to assist in achieving those goals. So those 3, I would say, when I first started teaching almost a decade ago, I didn't necessarily have under wraps. I definitely was aware of my feelings. I definitely was able to understand how people felt without them spelling it out. I could listen to my feelings and those of others and learn from them. I can recognize societal norms and expectations of expressing those emotions, right? I was aware of those feeling and framing framing rules, and I was able to do surface acting, not necessarily deep acting, though I'm able to do that now. And I did have a strong yet realistic sense of optimism. So with that said, I had about 5 on lock, but I would argue I probably have 8 out of 8. I would say most people that have deep interpersonal relationships with me would probably agree to that as well. Most of the people I am in deep interpersonal communication and relationships with come to me for advice, come to me for my opinion on things because I have a high level of emotional intelligence. And with emotional intelligence comes emotional competence. So this involves awareness of our own emotions, includes multiple emotions experienced simultaneously. This is going to be really important. So clearly when we grow up and we're learning about emotions and we're learning about societal expectations, we're oftentimes taught that we can only feel one emotion. And I think Inside Out are beautiful movies that especially talk about emotions. And as the main protagonist, Riley, is growing up, we see that sometimes a moment can be both joyous and sad, right? It can be a mixture of emotions. It's just not one emotion or another. But as we grow up, something can make me feel happy, but it also might be sad. So a perfect example might be a friend introduced you to an artist, or I'd say a former friend introduced you to an artist, and you really like that artist, and you eventually go to that artist's concert, but you're no longer friends with that person, but that artist reminds you of that former friend. And so you're happy to be there, you're experiencing the music, but you might also have a tinge of sadness because this person that was in your life that you thought might still be in your life that introduced you to this artist isn't present anymore. We also know that emotional competence includes the ability to recognize and empathize with others' emotions, awareness of the impact of our expression of emotions on others, and our sensitivity to cultural rules for expressing emotions. So with emotional competence, right, emotional competent people have insight into these cultural rules for expressing our emotions. So cultural rules vary on our context and the people involved in the potential scenario. So I think about funerals, right? This is an ideal place for you to maybe not address your issues with the widow. It's probably not. You're aware that the funeral is a space where people are grieving, they're mourning, and they're honoring the dead. So maybe you have an issue with the widow, but that's not going to be the place, right? The cultural rule, the framing rule, maybe even some of the feeling rules around there that this isn't a place for confrontation. So when we take all of that together, it kind of sets us up to further understand different obstacles to communicating emotions effectively. So we reference, right, cultural and societal expectations. These are typically thoughts in our society about who can show emotions, when, where, and why. So we know, especially in the American culture, right, one I've clearly grown up in, we know that there are gendered rules around emotional expression. And so men are taught that feeling rule that they shouldn't express many emotions. And this also goes to the loneliness epidemic, the self-inflicted loneliness epidemic that men are facing, right? They're allowing patriarchy to dictate these feeling and framing rules for them that tell them that it's not, quote unquote, manly to express your emotions. You can't be super happy for somebody or super sad, or you can't cry, you can't be vulnerable. And so this oftentimes harms people in the end because they are holding on to their emotions. And that book that I referenced before to you, the Soul Signature book, that book taught me how to let my feelings flow through me so I'm not holding on to them. It's important to hopefully validate those feelings, to recognize them, and to move through them. But we know that cultural and societal expectations, especially for men, tell them that they're just supposed to hold on to those feelings, they're supposed to suppress them. We also know that sometimes women are taught that they might be seen as, quote unquote, too emotional. So when or where or why or how can they express emotions? What places are appropriate for them to express these emotions versus what places is it maybe inappropriate? We also have self-protection. So this can be another obstacle for communicating our emotions effectively, where you don't want to give others information that can affect how they perceive or act towards you. So maybe they'll use this information to harm you in the future if you share something that's happened to you or share how you are feeling. We also know that protecting others can also be an obstacle to communicating emotions effectively. So you choose not to express feelings that we feel can hurt or upset others or cause them to lose face. I think about protecting others, especially you might think about family members and expressing your emotions, especially growing up as children. Sometimes we suppress how we're feeling. We don't fully want to say how we're feeling towards our loved ones, our caregivers, our parents, our grandparents, because we don't want to hurt their feelings. And then, of course, social and professional roles. Our roles oftentimes make it inappropriate to express certain emotions. So I recall particularly one instance in grad school where a professor kind of broke down and cried to us, and that was clearly a inappropriate interaction, right? The social roles that dictated that that was not supposed to be our way of engaging with one another. And so if we think about these obstacles, right, we have cultural and societal expectations, self-protection, protecting others, as well as our societal and professional roles. We also should be aware of guidelines for hopefully communicating these emotions effectively. So these are going to be some obstacles that we face, but how can we hopefully communicate effectively? So first and foremost is ineffective emotional expression. And so this is essentially when you speak in generalities, you don't necessarily own your feelings, and you use counterfeit language. So when you speak in generalities, you express your emotions, but in an ineffective way that does not let whoever you are sharing your feelings with truly understand you and how you're feeling. I feel bad. I'm happy. I'm mad. You're kind of expressing an emotion, but in an ineffective way. I'm fine. What does that mean? So we also know not owning your feelings is another ineffective emotional expression. So you start feelings in a way that you're stating feelings in a way that disowns personal responsibility is one of the most common obstacles to emotional expression. So not anyone else decides what their actions mean, and we're responsible for our feelings. So someone could do something to you, and they maybe did it out of spite. They maybe didn't even know what they were doing. But we ultimately need to own our own feelings. And this is where that I language comes into play that we've talked about on the podcast before. But bringing that back is that you need to own your feelings. I feel like this when you do this. It might not be that person's intention, but when you frame it with I language, I feel this way when this happens, you then allow for a better conversation to arise instead of someone being defensive. So you made me mad. You made me sad. Well, now the person's getting defensive because that maybe wasn't their intention at all. And so now instead of actually addressing the actions that created you to feel this way, they're now trying to defend their character. And then lastly, we have counterfeit emotional language. So language that seems to express emotions, but doesn't actually describe what a person is feeling. So to me, the perfect example of this is, why can't you leave me alone? Well, do you want me to leave you alone because you're tired? Do you want me to leave you alone because you're mad at me? Do you want me to leave you alone because you're busy? Do you want me to leave you alone because you're really happy right now and you're in your feelings and you just want to let that feeling flow through you? What is it? So we need to make sure that we're not speaking in generalities, that we're not owning our feelings, right? So that we are owning our feelings using that I language, and we are not using counterfeit emotional language that doesn't actually express what we are doing. Another thing that I would say is we should hopefully, a guideline for communicating emotions effectively is use our social media responsibly if you use social media. So social media may be a way to help you express and experience feelings and allows you to let those feelings flow through you. So I know Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, is a perfect space for a lot of people. Even TikTok, where people will maybe upload videos or go live and they'll just share how they're feeling, or Instagram Reels, and they'll let you know how they're feeling. But digital spaces aren't always safe spaces, and it's always a good practice not to post anything online that you would be afraid of someone seeing. So social media has become a substitute for emotional involvement with people in our face-to-face relationships. So sometimes people will express how they really feel about someone online, and when that person maybe confronts them about it or says, hey, is this about me or what's going on? Now you want to backtrack or act as if it wasn't. So it can be helpful in a sense of like a diary, but it's oftentimes public, even if you are private. There are people who can screenshot the things that you post and share them with other people. Oftentimes, I've seen tweets appear on Instagram or appear on other social media platforms. So it just doesn't stay where you think it might stay. So use it responsibly. And this then brings us to the emotional expression strategy, which I think is a really important and helpful thing for us to do and use, and something that I actively do internally all the time. So, first and foremost, you want to identify your emotions. So, choose how I want to express my emotions. So when it comes to the emotional expression strategy, it's first and foremost important that you're able to identify what you're feeling. What exactly are you feeling? Once you can put your finger on it, you need to decide if you want to communicate your feelings to someone. And if you decide you don't want to disclose those feelings, you should engage in emotion work or self-talk to manage those feelings intra-personally, right? Intra-personal communication is our internal communication that we have with ourselves. But if you decide to share your feelings, you need to figure out to whom do you want to disclose, when will you disclose those feelings, and where will this disclosure take place? Is it going to be face-to-face, online, over the phone, video chat, DMs, publicly on your timeline? After answering these questions, then, it's going to be important for you to manage how you express your feelings. So first, we identify our emotions. So how am I feeling? Let's say I am feeling sad. So now I want to choose how I want to express those emotions. Do I want to share them with someone? Yes. Or do I not want to share them with someone? No. And if I don't want to share my sad feelings, then maybe I need to take it to my journal. Maybe I need to self-talk and engage in some of that deep acting emotional work. But if I do decide to talk to someone, first and foremost, I need to own my feelings. So I want to use that I language. And I language accepts personal responsibility and is more descriptive. It's less likely to make others defensive, and it's honest. So I feel scared is great, but why do you feel scared? You need to tell me when you get home because you had me scared. Uh, do I? Right? While this phrase attempts to own your feelings of being scared, it falls short in creating a full understanding to the person that makes you feel scared. The statement comes off a bit possessive, you need to tell me, which is not the tone I'm sure any of us are making. But you might flip it and say, I feel scared when you don't let me know that you got home safely because it leads me to believe that something might have happened to you. This is a great example of owning your feelings. I feel scared when you don't let me know that this happens because my mind then thinks X, Y, and Z. You're not saying that the person purposely is trying to make you scared. You're not trying to chastise them. You're just letting them know, this is how I feel when you do this. And you're allowing them now the space to engage. Hopefully they're not as defensive. I say, you make me feel scared. You need to tell me when you get home because it's making me feel scared. Whoa, now this person is getting super defensive. And I'm famous for telling friends when they leave my house, hey, please just text me when you get in. We know the roads are crazy. We know the world we live in today. Anything can happen. And so 9 times out of 10, the person texts me when they get home. Sometimes even my parents, right, are guilty of not. I have shared locations to most of the closest people I'm with. So sometimes I'll check the location, be like, seems like you got home. What's going on? Or I'll text, an eye looking emoji to let that person know like what's going on. But it's important first and foremost to own our feelings. And so the emotional expression strategy hopefully helps us establish a supportive climate for talking about these feelings. So if we are owning our feelings with I language, right? I feel when this happens, you're doing descriptive, you're allowing them to understand why you feel that way and to address it. You also want to establish that supportive climate by limiting the amount of noise that may interfere with your communication. So we know semantic noise when words are not mutually understood, physiological noise, internal factors such as fatigue, headache, medication, physical noise, such as our surroundings, can all impact how we understand. So clearly, semantic noise, by using that I language, you're being more descriptive and describing. So I feel scared when you don't text me that you got home safely because my mind begins to wander and thinks that something happened to you. That's giving a lot of description. So hopefully there's not going to be some semantic noise. Hopefully, when you're talking to this person or texting them, the physical noise is mitigated, as well as maybe the psychological noise. But the psychological noise, maybe they have a little headache. Maybe you all were drinking. That might impair them as well. But hopefully, we're aware that if we can mitigate these types of noises that we've also discussed on earlier podcasts, we can hopefully establish a more supportive climate. We also want to rely on specific language. So this brings us back to the fact that words are arbitrary, they're abstract, and they're ambiguous representations of different phenomena. So words are arbitrary, meaning that words aren't inherently connected to what they represent. Meaning of words can change over time. Groups of friends might have words that only they understand. We also know ambiguous, meaning isn't clear cut. So affordable clothes can mean two different things to different people. Fashion Nova could be affordable clothes to one person, where maybe Gucci is affordable clothes to somebody else. All depends on their economic, financial situations. And then abstract. Language is not concrete or tangible. Someone's a negative person. Well, what exactly does that mean? Therefore, it's important to use concrete words and ask for clarification when someone's talking to you about their emotions. If you tell maybe your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, your husband, your wife that you don't feel loved, this is a rather abstract use of language. What does I don't feel loved mean? How if you tell your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife that you don't feel loved because they rarely spend any time with you, and when they do, they're always preoccupied on their phones, you're speaking with more specific language. And so now your partner has a better understanding of why you don't feel loved, and hopefully they can address it. And lastly, what I'll leave you with when we talk about emotions is we want to make sure that we are speaking with assertive communication. So we want to confirm ourselves when we express our thoughts and feelings honestly, and this happens when you assert yourself. So when it comes to different forms of communication, there is aggressive communication, there's that sweet spot of assertive communication, and then there is deferential communication. So aggressive communication is when you put your own feelings above or deride others' thoughts, feelings, and goals. Deferential communication is where you subordinate your own feelings for someone else's. And assertive communication is when you express your thoughts and feelings and allow for someone else to also express their own. So the perfect example is, let's say I've had a really great time, we had a really great date, and I want to go on another date with you. And I'll break it down from assertive, deferential, and aggressive. So assertive would be, hey, I had a really great time on this date. I really enjoyed hanging out with you. I'd love to get together again soon. Would next Thursday at 6 p.m. for happy hour work for you? You're letting the person know how you feel. You enjoyed the time. You're, though, not being overly aggressive by deriding their own feelings, and you're not subordinating your feelings. And hopefully you'll understand that when I give you the same example in those terms. So you're being assertive, you're letting them know how you feel, how that you want to go out on a date with them again, but you're also allowing them to offer up that maybe they didn't enjoy the date. Maybe they're not interested in having a date, or maybe Thursday at 6 o'clock for happy hour isn't going to work for them. On the flip side, aggressive communication, where you put your feelings above others, would be, I've loved this date. I had a great time. I'm going to pick you up next week at 7 or 6 o'clock for a happy hour. So be ready then. Ooh, okay. You are basically kind of telling them what it is. You are not allowing for them to offer up their own thoughts, their own feelings on the situation. And deferential will be you subordinate your own feelings. So, hey, I had a really great time. I'd love to go on another date, but I also understand if you're not really interested or you're too busy to go on the date, but let me know. But also, if you don't want to let me know, I totally understand as well. I've just given you 3 different examples. You can already hopefully hear that. One, hopefully the assertive way, you're expressing your emotions, but you're allowing for the other person to also express their emotions and say if they're interested or not, is going to be better than aggressive, just strictly telling somebody, as well as super deferential, right? Where you're subordinating your own feelings, right? I'd like this, but it's okay. I'd love to, but I also understand. You're kind of coming off wishy-washy a bit. So we want to make sure that we are going to be assertive with our communication when it comes to emotions, but also just in general, because that then allows for you to have a better way to approach that emotional expression strategy of engaging with people about your emotions. So that, I think, is where I'm going to leave it for our covering of emotions. Of course, I guess one little last tidbit would be to be mindful about how you respond to others. So how you express your emotions and how you respond to others when they communicate their emotions is really going to be important. So you want to respond sensitively when others communicate their emotions. Sometimes our first tendency is to respond with general statements, so effectively telling others that they aren't allowed to feel how they're going to feel. Oh, you'll get through it. It's okay. That stuff happens. You'll be all right. Sometimes that can feel dismissive. Also, other tendencies, and I know I've been guilty of this too, is you try to solve the problem so the feelings will go away. So sometimes people just want to vent. And so I know Kiara and I are famous sometimes. We used to do this, but we grow, we learn, we become better communicators. As I've always said, interpersonal communication is something we can all continually work at and continually get better. Is her and I used to sometimes get frustrated with one another at times because we would call to express our emotions, and sometimes I'm just calling to vent. I don't want you to fix my problem. And so now I'm getting upset at you further because I just called to vent to my bestie, and now my bestie's telling me what I need to do, and that wasn't what I was looking for. And vice versa. Sometimes she would call just to vent, and I'd be like, okay, well, this is what I think you should do, and that wasn't what she was looking for. So now 9 times out of 10, what we do now is, call and be like, hey, I want to talk to you about this problem. I'm like, great. Are you looking for me to just listen and vent? 2, are you looking to me to solve a problem? Usually it's kind of in between, right? Usually the conversation is I want to vent, I want to get off my chest, and then depending on how I feel after I vent, maybe we can get into problem solving mode. Perfect. But I'm not now going to jump into problem solving mode and make you feel more frustrated about whatever you're trying to vent about. So that is our oceans of emotions in a nutshell. So now I am going to move on to our Ask Dr. Shepard. And of course, if you ever want to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to submit it to offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that email is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So as I shared before, I received 2 emails that were basically similar in the question around dating and how both of these individuals felt overwhelmed and jaded when it comes to dating. So this is from Lisa and as well as Max. So I kind of just blended what they were talking about. They both lamented on how it feels as if you have to act like you're not really interested or care, how you shouldn't respond instantly, or you shouldn't be too available when you're getting to know someone. And so they both basically asked for my advice on how to maneuver in this current dating economy and provide any tips, tricks, or guidance. So the first thing that I always stress, and I talk about this with my students often, is nobody is making you subscribe to these dating norms but yourself. So this norms or values around you can't respond too quickly, you got to be interested but not too interested, you kind of got to play it off. If someone hurt your feelings, it's not a big deal, they barely know you. If you like someone, be consistent, be present, be explicit in your courtship, be available. And if the person is buying into these arbitrary rules of not being consistent at first, showing little interest, not engaging, then maybe you're just not compatible with this person and they're not who you should be investing your time into getting to know. I also think it's important when we think about dating, the majority of dating, as we have seen, has shifted to online dating. So whether it's through apps or social media, people are trying to find their potential romantic partners more so online now than ever. So I think it's important, and as I've shared before, that you have some online dating rules that you are going to stick to. So I know that these online dating rules always help me feel less jaded and shift through the endless swipes and potential matches in a way that didn't make it feel as personal. So one thing I'll share before I delve into some dating rules that I have that you might want to take up or might not, right? I've shared these with friends who are online dating, and some of them have taken them up and have seen some success with that. So hopefully it can work for you. But the first thing I'll say is if you're starting to feel jaded, take a break, because nothing is worse than someone genuinely trying to hopefully get to know you, and you are treating them maybe not as positively due to other people's treatment of you. That's not fair to that person. So if you are feeling jaded, if you are feeling negative when it comes to online dating, take a break. It'll be there. Put your account on pause. Remove yourself from the matches. People are sliding into your DMs and they're interested. You don't have to accept them. Or you can tell them, hey, I'm not in the headspace to date right now. That's the first thing. Never want to hopefully use what people have done to you negatively to someone else who's trying to genuinely get to know you. Other rules I have. So when it comes especially to online dating, if you're using these apps that match you with people, I have a kind of hard, fast rule that if I say hello to you, some people are like, well, if you match with me, or then you say hello first. If I match with you, I'll say hello first, right? Some people write that on their profile. 9 times out of 10, they still don't follow that, right? I remember back in the day where I'd match with people and they would have said that on their profile, and we're looking at 2-3 days later and they haven't said anything to me. So what I do is if I'm matched with someone, whether I do the matching or they've matched, I say hi first, right? And if the person can't be bothered to respond within 48 hours to that first initial hello, then I just unmatch. I don't take it personal at all. Sometimes what I've learned from my research into interpersonal communications and dating is sometimes people literally are just using these apps as a game. I want to see how many attractive people I can match with. I'm not really actually looking or interested. I'm just trying to see who's interested in me. And sometimes people literally are just doing this on their commutes. So they're on the train, they're on the bus, they're commuting to work, they're on downtime, they pull up the app, but they're not actually invested or interested. So don't take it personal. We don't know what someone's dating intentions actually are. So my hard and fast rule is once I've matched with someone, if we haven't said more than hello within 48 hours, it's an unmatch. Next thing I have is if the communication has kind of died off and it's been 72 hours, so 3 days. If I've asked you a question, we've been talking, and people go to sleep or, okay, I'm not on the app, and I don't hear from you after I ask you that question within 72 hours, I unmatch, right? 3 days have gone by. If we had some banter going and we were building something, if I don't come across your mind within 3 days, okay, we're just not a match, and that's okay. Another hard and fast rule I have is if I am leading the majority of the conversation. So what's hilarious to me and might be a yellow flag is oftentimes people flex about like, oh, I'm looking for consistent communication. And to me, what I've found in my research as well as my own personal experience is sometimes people don't know how to hold conversations. So I am a conversationalist by trade, by nature, by nurture, right? My mom will talk to a random stranger in any place and get their life story. We literally went to the movies yesterday and I was leaving the movie and the woman who was sitting in front of my mom grabs my mom as we're leaving and starts a whole conversation with her, right? I come from the communication trade, not just the education, but biologically, I guess, right? So my thing is, I know how to lead a conversation. I can get someone talking. I can keep someone talking. But if your responses are, and what about you? Or you too? What do you think? And you never ask me a pointed question, or I ask you a question and you answer it and you don't ask me a question. Ooh, and that happens a few times. Well, what are we doing here? Is this a job interview? You want me to interview you to be my potential partner? I don't like that. I want a conversation where you're asking me questions as well. And so for me, those have been rules that help me get out of the jadedness of dating. I also, as I shared before, don't believe in the not being available. So if you send me a message and I'm on my phone, I can answer it. I'm going to answer it right away. I'm not going to wait a few hours or 20 minutes. Who cares? Why buy into these arbitrary, ambiguous, abstract dating rules that you don't have to? to buy into. Have the rules that you think are important. So for me, consistency is always going to be important. Consistency also doesn't look like talking every day in my case, right? And I've talked about this with Kiara before, right? Consistency doesn't have to be every day. And honestly, for me, shouldn't be every day when we are starting to get to know each other, because that's how you get communication burnout with people as well. And as a part of that jadedness, where you're talking to someone every day, all day, texting them, but then nothing is ever moving. And that brings me to the last rule I'll share, which is have a sell-by date. And when I say sell-by date, when are we moving this conversation off this platform or off this app? When are we moving to talking on the phone, video calling, going on a date? What I've seen, especially with this young generation, is people get trapped in this cycle of just, what are you doing? How are you doing? What did you do this weekend? And you never break that cycle. And so you're just trapped having these same cyclical conversations with people. But the goal is to be on these apps, to hopefully move off these apps, to delete these apps, to create a partnership, if that's what you're looking for. And I think it's important to have that for yourself and also be very explicit with people. Some of these apps will tell you, like they'll give you those prompts. Are you looking for long-term, short-term, unclear, trying to figure it out? And people will say that, but also ask them, like, are you here for a committed long-term relationship? Are you here just for fun? Are you here just to pass the time? Pinpointedly ask people that, because if what you're looking for is not what they're looking for, it's no harm, no foul. You're just not compatible. Let's move on. So I think that is how you can avoid some of that jadedness when it comes to online dating. I know when I was in Atlanta recently, I got one of my friends on the apps and kind of gave him some of these ground rules, and he's been using them, and he's found it to make it less of a draining experience. It still can be draining, right? You got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince, is that metaphor. But this will hopefully help you as well as others who are listening maneuver the dating experience a little better. So that is where we will leave it. Until next time, I hope to hear from you. As always, please feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com, and I'll see you on the next one.